At exactly 11:34 p.m. on March 17, 2020, security cameras captured nurse Sarah Hamilton walking out of Maine Medical Center for the very last time. She had just finished a 12-hour shift fighting an invisible war against a virus that was reshaping the world. What those cameras didn't capture was the trusted doctor who was waiting for her in the shadows. A respected physician who had spent months manipulating her, stalking her, and planning her murder. For 4 years, Dr. Marcus Thompson lived a perfect lie. He saved lives by day and attended charity galas by night, all while Sarah Hamilton's body remained hidden in a secret grave. But in 2024, advanced forensic technology would expose the shocking truth about a medical professional who used his position to prey on vulnerable women. If you're fascinated by how modern DNA science is exposing killers who thought they were untouchable, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because today's case will shatter your trust in authority forever. This is the story of evil in Scrubs, Portland, Maine. In March 2020 was a city holding its breath. The COVID-19 pandemic had just arrived in America, and the streets that were normally bustling with life had fallen eerily silent. Businesses were shuttered, schools were closed, and the only people moving through the darkness were essential workers like 28-year-old Sarah Elizabeth Hamilton. Sarah was everything you'd want in a nurse during a global crisis. Compassionate but tough, skilled but humble. The kind of medical professional who could insert an IV on the first try and hold a dying patient's hand with equal expertise. She had graduated from the University of Southern Maine's nursing program with honors, and had quickly earned the respect of her colleagues at Maine Medical Center's intensive care unit. But Sarah wasn't just defined by her career. She was a woman with dreams, plans, and a future that seemed as bright as the lighthouse tattooed on her left wrist. She lived with her fiancé Daniel Fraser in a cozy apartment on Danforth Street, and they were planning an October wedding on the Maine coast. The dress was already hanging in their closet, still in its protective bag, waiting for a celebration that would never come. That Tuesday evening shift on March 17 had been particularly brutal. The ICU was operating under strict pandemic protocols, with every bed filled and every nurse stretched beyond their limits. Sarah had spent 12 hours fitting N95 masks, checking ventilators, and comforting patients who couldn't have visitors anymore. The virus was still abstract then, more of a threat on the news than a tangible danger, but the fear was already concrete and overwhelming. As Sarah clocked out at 11:34 p.m., she looked exactly like what she was, an exhausted healthcare worker at the beginning of the world's greatest medical crisis. Her navy blue scrubs were slightly wrinkled. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had loosened during her shift, and she carried a canvas tote bag with her water bottle, a worn mystery novel, and her wallet. The security footage shows Sarah moving with the tired precision of someone who had navigated exhaustion countless times before. She pushed open the heavy employee exit door and stepped into the cold March air, her breath visible in the frigid darkness. The camera captured her walking toward the parking lot, toward her silver Honda Civic with its dented bumper and faded Bernie Sanders sticker from 2016. But what the security cameras couldn't see was the dark blue Audi sedan that had been waiting in the shadows for over an hour. Behind the wheel sat Dr. Marcus Thompson, the chief of anesthesiology at Maine Medical Center, a man who was respected by his colleagues, trusted by his patients, and secretly obsessed with the young nurse, who was about to discover that her biggest threat wasn't the virus spreading through the hospital. It was the predator who had been watching her every move. Sarah had no idea that for months, Dr. Thompson had been using his position and authority to manipulate her into what he called a mentorship, but what was actually a carefully orchestrated campaign of psychological control. She didn't know that he had purchased a burner phone, specifically to contact her outside of work. She didn't know that he had been tracking her schedule, learning her routines, and planning for this exact moment when she would be alone and vulnerable in an empty parking lot. The last confirmed sighting of Sarah Hamilton alive was at 11:34 p.m. By 11:52 p.m., her cell phone had pinged off a tower near the Presumpscot River, 8 miles northwest of the hospital in a heavily forested area, where screams couldn't be heard and secrets could be buried forever. When Sarah failed to come home that night, Daniel Fraser called her phone 23 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. By morning, his voice was hoarse from panic and sleeplessness, and he was calling the Portland Police Department to report that the woman he loved had simply vanished without a trace. The lockdown made everything harder for investigators. Portland police were already stretched thin dealing with pandemic enforcement and a surge in domestic violence calls. The streets were empty, businesses were closed, and potential witnesses were locked inside their homes, too afraid of the virus to venture out and possibly see something that could help solve the case. Detective Aaron Murphy, a 22-year veteran with the department, was assigned to what initially seemed like a straightforward missing person case. But as she examined Sarah's car, which was found untouched in the hospital parking lot with her purse and keys still inside, Murphy realized she was dealing with something much more sinister. The vehicle told a story of interrupted plans. Sarah's purse sat on the passenger seat containing her credit cards, 43 in cash, and a crumpled grocery list. Her phone, however, was gone. The first clue that this wasn't a case of someone walking away from their life voluntarily. What Detective Murphy couldn't have known was that at that very moment, the man responsible for Sarah's disappearance was performing surgery at Maine Medical Center, calmly administering anesthesia to patients while their colleague's body lay hidden in a secret location that would remain undiscovered for over 4 years. Dr. Marcus Thompson was the kind of man who inspired confidence without even trying. At 45 years old, he had built a sterling reputation over 18 years of practicing anesthesiology, with the last 12 years at Maine Medical Center where he had risen to become chief of his department. Educated at Dartmouth and Johns Hopkins, Thompson was everything a medical professional should be: skilled, dedicated, and seemingly compassionate. His personal life appeared equally admirable. He was married to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a pediatric surgeon at the same hospital, and they had 2 children, ages 9 and 11. They lived in a renovated farmhouse in Cape Elizabeth with ocean views, the kind of home that appeared in lifestyle magazines and made neighbors envious. Thompson was active in medical charities, volunteered at free clinics, and had published respected research papers on pain management and patient safety. But beneath this perfect facade, Thompson was harboring a darkness that none of his colleagues, patients, or even his wife could have imagined. For years, he had been using his position of authority to prey on younger female medical staff, carefully selecting victims who were vulnerable to his manipulation and too frightened to speak out against a powerful physician. The pattern had started in 2015 with Dr. Claire Boyle, a medical resident who had made the mistake of accepting Thompson's offer of mentorship. What began as professional guidance quickly escalated into something far more sinister. Thompson had shown up at Boyle's apartment uninvited, sent her inappropriate messages at all hours, and made her feel like her career depended on accepting his unwanted attention. When Boyle finally found the courage to file an internal complaint, the hospital's response was swift and typical. They quietly settled the matter through HR, encouraged Boyle to accept a transfer to a different department, and Thompson received what amounted to a warning and mandatory counseling. The incident never became public. Boyle left Maine Medical 6 months later for a position in Connecticut, and the file was sealed as if the predatory behavior had never happened. Thompson learned from this experience, but not in the way the hospital hoped. Instead of stopping his inappropriate behavior, he simply became more careful, more calculated in his approach to potential victims. By 2020, he had identified the perfect target: Sarah Hamilton. Sarah was everything Thompson found irresistible in his victims. She was young, talented, and ambitious, the kind of nurse who attended continuing education seminars and asked thoughtful questions about patient care. She was also engaged to be married, which Thompson saw as both a challenge and an opportunity. In his twisted psychology, corrupting a committed relationship was part of the thrill. Thompson's pursuit of Sarah began subtly in late 2019. He started by complimenting her work in front of other staff members, praising her dedication and suggesting she had the potential for advancement if she continued to develop her skills. He offered to mentor her, to share his knowledge about complex cases, and to help her navigate the politics of hospital administration. To Sarah, Thompson's attention felt like recognition for her hard work. She was flattered that such a respected physician had noticed her abilities and was willing to invest time in her professional development. She began attending his educational seminars more regularly and occasionally stayed after to ask questions about specific cases. But Thompson's intentions were never professional. He carefully escalated the relationship, suggesting they meet for coffee to discuss cases, then proposing walks around the hospital campus for privacy. He gradually steered their conversations from medical topics to personal ones, asking about her relationship with Daniel, her future plans, her fears and insecurities. In February 2020, Thompson purchased a burner phone with cash from a Walmart in Scarborough. He gave Sarah the number, claiming it was for urgent consultations about critical patients, but really it was his way of communicating with her outside the hospital's monitored systems. The text messages between them, which would later be recovered by digital forensic specialists, showed Thompson's psychological manipulation in action. He positioned himself as someone who understood her better than her fiancé did, someone who recognized her potential in ways that Daniel never could. He suggested that she was wasting her talents in a small-town life, that she deserved better than what her current relationship offered. Thompson was an expert at identifying emotional vulnerabilities and exploiting them for his own purposes. By March 2020, Sarah had begun to realize the true nature of Thompson's interest in her. The recovered text messages show her growing discomfort and her attempts to establish boundaries. On March 15, she sent him a message that read, "We need to talk. This can't continue." His response was immediate and ominous, "Not now. Too risky." 2 days later, on March 17, Sarah sent what would be her final message to Thompson, "I'm serious, I'm done." His reply would seal her fate, "Meet me after your shift. We'll figure it out." What Thompson meant by "figure it out" was never a conversation or a peaceful resolution. He had already decided that if he couldn't have Sarah on his terms, if she was going to reject him and potentially expose his behavior, then she couldn't be allowed to exist at all. The meeting in the hospital parking lot after Sarah's shift wasn't a consultation about patient care or a discussion about their relationship. It was a carefully planned abduction carried out by a man who had spent months studying Sarah's routines and preparing for the moment when she would become a liability to his carefully constructed life. Thompson had convinced Sarah to get into his car under the pretense of driving to a private location where they could talk without being overheard. But instead of talking, he drove her to a remote area near the Presumpscot River where her screams couldn't be heard and her body couldn't be easily found. The search for Sarah Hamilton in March 2020 was hampered by the unprecedented circumstances of a global pandemic. Portland's streets were empty, businesses were closed, and potential witnesses were locked inside their homes, creating the perfect environment for a killer to operate without being observed. Detective Erin Murphy and her team conducted the most thorough investigation possible under the circumstances. They interviewed everyone who had worked with Sarah that night, reviewed hours of security footage, and deployed search teams with cadaver dogs to comb through the forests around the Presumpscot River where Sarah's phone had last pinned. But they found nothing. No witnesses, no physical evidence, and no trace of what had happened to Sarah Hamilton. The case that had started as a missing person investigation gradually transformed into a cold case file that would sit in a gray metal cabinet for the next 4 years. During those 4 years, Dr. Marcus Thompson lived what appeared to be a perfect life. He continued his work at Maine Medical Center, earning promotions and accolades for his dedication to patient care. He attended charity galas with his wife Alina, coached his children's soccer teams, and presented research papers at medical conferences around the country. To everyone who knew him, Thompson was the embodiment of professional success and personal integrity. He had successfully compartmentalized his crime, burying the memory of what he had done to Sarah alongside her body in a location known only to him. But Thompson's perfect facade began to crack in small, almost imperceptible ways. Colleagues noticed that he had become more controlling with female staff members, more possessive of his authority, quicker to anger when challenged. His wife Elena observed changes in his behavior at home: insomnia, anxiety, and an obsession with news coverage of missing person cases. Most tellingly, Thompson's financial records from the weeks following Sarah's disappearance showed a pattern of behavior consistent with someone trying to cover up a crime. He made several large cash withdrawals totaling nearly $8,000, carefully structured to avoid triggering automatic reporting thresholds. When later questioned about these withdrawals, Thompson claimed he had been saving for a family vacation and preferred to keep cash on hand during the uncertainty of the pandemic. But the cash wasn't for a vacation. It was for cleanup, disposal, and the kind of specialized services that don't accept credit card payments and don't ask questions about what they're being hired to do. The GPS data from Thompson's 2020 Audi sedan, which would eventually be recovered by investigators, told the real story of March 17 and 18, 2020. The vehicle had been at Maine Medical Center until 11:52 p.m., then traveled north following Route 295 toward Falmouth, passing near the area where Sarah's phone had pinged off the Presumpscot River Tower. At 1:00 a.m. on March 18, the GPS showed Thompson's car near Sabago Lake, in a remote forested area about 20 miles northwest of Portland. The vehicle remained there for nearly 3 hours before returning to Cape Elizabeth, arriving at Thompson's home address at 4:00 a.m. But Thompson hadn't spent those 3 hours talking to Sarah or trying to convince her to keep their relationship secret. He had spent them digging a grave in the frozen March ground, burying evidence of his crime, and constructing the elaborate deception that would protect him for the next 4 years. The most chilling aspect of Thompson's deception was how completely he had fooled everyone around him. His wife Elena had no idea that the man she slept next to every night was a killer. His children had no idea that their father was a predator who had murdered an innocent woman. His colleagues at Maine Medical had no idea that they were working alongside someone who had betrayed every principle of medical ethics. Thompson had even fooled himself to some degree, constructing a narrative in which he was the victim of Sarah's unreasonable demands and emotional instability. In his twisted psychology, he had done what was necessary to protect his family and his career from a woman who was threatening to destroy everything he had worked to build. But secrets have a way of demanding to be revealed, and evidence has a way of surfacing even when killers believe they have buried it forever. On a bright Saturday morning in July 2024, a hiker named Trevor Boyle would make a discovery that would resurrect a case everyone had forgotten and expose the truth about a respected doctor who had literally gotten away with murder for over 4 years. The backpack that Trevor found buried in the woods near Sabago Lake contained Sarah's driver's license, her cell phone, her keys, and most importantly, her DNA on items that had been deliberately hidden by her killer. But it also contained something Thompson hadn't anticipated: microscopic evidence that would link the crime directly back to him through advanced forensic techniques that hadn't been available in 2020. The discovery of Sarah's belongings was like pulling on a thread that would unravel Thompson's entire life. Within weeks, investigators would have enough evidence to arrest the man who had murdered Sarah Hamilton, and prove that the most dangerous predators are often the ones we trust the most. The discovery of Sarah Hamilton's backpack on July 15, 2024, by retired postal worker Trevor Boyle marked the beginning of the end for Dr. Marcus Thompson's 4-year deception. What started as a routine hike through the woods near Sabago Lake became the breakthrough that Portland police had been waiting for since 2020. Lieutenant Erin Murphy, now promoted but still haunted by the case that had defined her career, assembled a forensic team that included the most advanced DNA analysis technology available. The backpack and its contents were transported to the state crime lab in Augusta, where specialists began the painstaking process of extracting evidence from items that had been exposed to 4 years of moisture, temperature changes, and decomposition. The damaged iPhone found in the backpack presented the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity. The phone's screen was cracked, the battery was long dead, and water damage had corrupted much of its internal memory. But forensic specialist Dr. Aisha Patel, brought in from Boston specifically for this case, had spent 2 decades analyzing encrypted communications for federal agencies. Using specialized equipment that could retrieve data from severely damaged devices, Dr. Patel began reconstructing the deleted text messages from Sarah's phone. Most of the messages were corrupted beyond recognition, but fragments remained. Fragments that told the story of a woman trying desperately to escape from a relationship that had become increasingly dangerous. The recovered messages between Sarah and the unknown burner phone number painted a clear picture of Thompson's escalating control and Sarah's growing fear. "We need to talk," she had written on March 15th. "I'm serious. I'm done," she had texted on March 17th, just hours before her disappearance. But it was the metadata, the invisible information embedded in every digital communication, that provided the smoking gun Murphy needed. Every text message carries timestamps, geolocation data, and device identifiers that most people never think about. Dr. Patel extracted this metadata and cross-referenced it with cellular tower records from March 2020. The burner phone had pinged off towers near Maine Medical Center repeatedly over several weeks, always during times when Dr. Thompson was known to be at the hospital. The pattern was so consistent it was like a digital fingerprint, proving that Thompson was the mysterious correspondent who had been manipulating Sarah in the weeks before her death. Murphy obtained warrants for Thompson's phone records and found the final piece of evidence she needed. Thompson's personal cell phone had been in contact with Sarah's actual number multiple times between January and March 2020, including a call placed on March 17th at 10:47 p.m., just hours before she disappeared. When confronted with this evidence during a voluntary interview, Thompson initially maintained his innocence. He claimed the phone calls were work-related, professional consultations about patient care. He denied knowing anything about a burner phone or inappropriate text messages. But Murphy had learned to read body language over 25 years in law enforcement, and Thompson's carefully controlled demeanor betrayed him. His answers were too smooth, too rehearsed, like he had been preparing for this conversation for 4 years. The investigation expanded to include Thompson's financial records, his vehicle's GPS data, and most damning of all, his history with other female colleagues. The interview with Dr. Claire Boyle, now Dr. Claire Morrow, revealed the pattern of predatory behavior that had made Sarah Thompson's inevitable target. Boyle described Thompson's methods in chilling detail: the initial charm and professional mentorship, the gradual escalation to personal topics, the unwanted attention that became impossible to escape. When she had tried to end the relationship, Thompson had become angry and vindictive, convincing her that speaking out would destroy her career. The forensic evidence from the backpack provided the final proof Murphy needed. Microscopic paint transfer found on the backpack's exterior matched the interior carpet fibers of Thompson's 2020 Audi sedan. Soil analysis from fabric samples matched the specific mineral composition of the area around Sebago Lake. Most importantly, DNA evidence recovered from items in the backpack showed that Sarah had been in Thompson's vehicle on the night she disappeared. The GPS data from Thompson's car told the complete story of March 17th and 18th, 2020. The vehicle had traveled from Maine Medical Center to the Presumpscot River area, then to Sebago Lake, where it remained for nearly 3 hours while Thompson disposed of evidence and constructed his alibi. But the investigation revealed an even more disturbing truth. Thompson hadn't acted alone. His wife, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, had made a call to a professional cleaning service at 3:00 a.m. on March 18th, requesting an emergency deep clean of their home. The service had arrived at 6:00 a.m. and spent 4 hours scrubbing the house from top to bottom. When forensic teams searched the Thompson residence, they found luminol positive residue in the garage, suggesting that blood had been cleaned from the concrete floor. They also discovered receipts for industrial strength cleaning supplies and, hidden in Thompson's home office, Sarah's cell phone charger, and a silver necklace that Daniel Fraser identified as one Sarah had been wearing the night she disappeared. The evidence suggested that Sarah's body had been brought to the Thompson residence after her murder, likely to the garage, before being transported elsewhere for final disposal. The backpack found at Sebago Lake had been a decoy, a misdirection designed to lead investigators away from the truth. Thompson's arrest at the Portland Downtown Medical Association's annual gala on September 12, 2024, was deliberately orchestrated for maximum impact. Murphy wanted the medical community to see that no amount of prestige or professional reputation could shield someone from accountability for murder. As Thompson was led away in handcuffs, cameras flashing and videos uploading to social media, the carefully constructed life he had built over 4 years of lies finally collapsed. The Distinguished Service Award he was supposed to receive that night became evidence of how completely he had fooled everyone around him. Elena Rodriguez was arrested 8 days later, charged with accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice. The evidence suggested she had known about her husband's crime and had actively participated in covering it up, choosing to protect her family's reputation rather than seek justice for a murdered young woman. The trial was set for spring 2025, but regardless of the legal proceedings, the truth was finally clear. Dr. Marcus Thompson had used his position, authority, and medical knowledge to prey on vulnerable women. When Sarah Hamilton had tried to escape his control, he had killed her and hidden her body in a location that might never be found. The case proved that evil can wear the most respectable faces, and that the people we trust with our lives can sometimes be the ones who pose the greatest danger. But it also proved that modern forensic science, combined with dedicated investigators who refuse to give up, can expose even the most carefully hidden crimes. Sarah Elizabeth Hamilton's voice had been silenced on March 17, 2020, but through advanced DNA analysis, digital forensics, and the determination of those who loved her, her case would speak loudly about the importance of never giving up on justice, no matter how much time passes or how powerful the perpetrator appears to be.